Hello, this is MJ Renshaw, and you are listening to the Being Method podcast. Let's start by taking a big deep breath together. Hello, beautiful beings. Welcome back to the Being Method podcast. I'm MJ Renshaw, and I'm so excited to talk today about exploring a topic of mine that I love to study and I love to read upon because it is one that is expanding so much every year. I feel like the studies that are coming out on this are just incredible. I believe all the studies I'm going to mention in this podcast are in the last 20 years. So it's very contemporary. At 2005, 2003, I don't know when Jared Pollock was doing his work, but very recently. So this is very new science on how trauma gets stored in the body. And of course, we're going to go into using breathwork to release that trauma. This is one of the foundational reasons as to why we certify our people, our breathwork facilitators, to learn somatic breathwork, which means that you get into your body and you actually feel it to heal it. We certify them in every single breathwork technique there is out there. And I really believe that we have to embody ourselves in order to heal. I think we've spent so long on the healing journey reading self-help books and talking about what's going on and creating all these stories and these explanations and being really in the logic side of things, which is so helpful. I'm not saying it's not helpful at all. For me, though, when I started to explore the somatic piece and just feeling things, maybe they didn't make sense, maybe I didn't know where it came from, I really started to shift my symptoms. That was the marker for me, was my symptoms shifting. But I really was able to become a whole new person as well. Like if I think about who I was a decade ago, I was a very different person than who I am today. And it's definitely because of doing this somatic work. So let's get into it. This episode, it's going to blend biology, emotional memory, spiritual healing. And at the end of this episode, I hope that you're feeling a little bit more connected to your body and your breath and your innate ability to heal. Going back to the logic side of things, the benefit of it is that when you understand how the body works, how trauma is stored, and how you can release it, and you believe that to be true, like 2 + 2 is 4, like that sort of belief, it's so much easier to actually do it. Like Joe Dispenza says, science is the language of healing right now. So let's dive into the science because, as you know, I'm a science and spirituality girly. So let's get into it. Trauma isn't just psychological. It is biological. So for a long time, trauma was seen as something that happened in the mind. But more recently, research, especially in the field of neurobiology and somatic psychology, shows us that trauma is deeply somatic. Somatic meaning the body. Not that the body and the mind are separate, but just that we have isolated trauma to being something that's only in our mind when it is not. It is in your body. So we go through something overwhelming. We don't have the capacity, safety, or support to process it, and the body freezes it. It gets stored in our tissues, in our nervous system, and even in our cellular memory, right down to the cellular level. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, in his book, The Body Keeps the Score, explains that trauma is not an event itself. It's what happens in the body afterwards when that event cannot be fully metabolized. So this is just to say, I know people use terms like big T and little t trauma. It really doesn't matter. whatever the event was is not the predictor of the trauma itself. So even if you think, oh, nothing traumatic has really happened to me, or you're thinking about things being smaller than other people's, it doesn't matter. We cannot quantify it. There could have been a moment that seemed really small, but it could have felt big for you, and you could have been alone with that, and that became the trauma. I have a girlfriend who's been working through something for so long, which is not being invited to a birthday party in like grade 4 or something. And that may seem small, but for her, it was a deep wound of rejection. And she's been working through that still. So this is just to say it's all valid. Even if the thing is seemingly small, it can be traumatic. This can lead to holding trauma in your body, can lead to things like chronic muscle tension, autoimmune diseases, digestive issues, anxiety and panic disorders, emotional numbing, which for me, that looks a lot like addiction in people, and even altered immune and hormonal function. So this isn't a mental weakness. It's a brilliant protective mechanism, but it can become stuck. And our job when seeking out to heal from traumatic events is how can we become unstuck? And I'm just going to say before we get into the end of this episode where I offer, some more resources on this, I always say the way to get unstuck from trauma is to choose the path of fun, of safety, and pleasure. Okay, so let's look at some of the parts of the body that really get affected when we are traumatized. The first being fascia. So this is the fabric of feeling in the body. It's always called in textbooks, even the textbooks that I have here in my office, it's called a connective tissue. And it's so much more than that now. Fascia is one of the organs in the body which we are studying contemporarily and learning new things about all the time. So it's a tissue that wraps around every single muscle, bone, nerve, organ. It wraps around everything. And it's a continuous web of tissue that holds our structure together, but is also deeply rich in sensory neurons. I always use the analogy of fascia being like when you open an orange, how there's that white film that wraps each piece. That's like fascia in the body. It wraps around every single organ, every single muscle, everything. It really connects the top of your head right down to your toes. So according to research by Dr. Robert Schlepp, I hope I get that right, fascia contains 10 times more sensory and nerve endings than muscle. It's actually considered a sensory organ in its own right. That is amazing. So when we experience trauma, fascia can contract and hold the tension indefinitely. And because it's not just structural, but also fluid and electrical, it can store emotional memory as a pattern of restriction. This is why people with trauma can sometimes have chronic hip pain, chronic shoulder pain, chronic neck pain. They can have issues with lymph drainage. They can have issues with blood supply to certain areas. If your fascia restricts, that can cause an immense number of issues for organs that it's restricting around. And it's so, like for me personally, I've got a right shoulder fascial trauma that's in there that I've been working on for years. But the more stressed out I get, the more my right shoulder will kind of creep up towards my ear. And when I do a breathwork session, it'll go right back down and relax. And it's so emotional, so emotional. That's why people experience intense emotional releases during somatic bodywork and breathwork. You're literally unlocking old tension from your fascia that was linked to a memory or an emotion you couldn't process at the time. This is trauma healing, right? And just the study reference there is Robert Schlepp, 2003, Fascial Plasticity, a New Neurological Explanation, Part 1, Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. Okay, let's move on to water and emotional frequency. This one's going to sound very, very woo-woo, but I promise you there is very solid evidence on this. So zoom out even more. Let's talk about water. And I go on in this in my new book, How to Cry. This stuff is fascinating, thinking about the emotions and our beliefs in the water in our body and just looking at the physiology of that. So, your body is over 70% water, and your fascia and extracellular matrix are essentially gel like fluid systems. These systems conduct information through vibration, not just chemical reactions. So freaking cool. The body's so cool. So the guy famous for this is named Dr. Gerald Pollack. He created the fourth phase of water. So beyond there just being um, liquid, gas, and ice, I don't even know if I'm saying those right. There's the fourth phase of water, which is like a gel-like structure or an exclusion zone, easy water. It's referred to as structured water, easy water, um, crystalline water. People have all sorts of different names for it. And that it can store energy and information. I read his book a long time ago, but if I remember correctly, the water can just go into these little crystalline structures where each crystalline structure creates its own battery with the electrons. So it creates these polarizations in which energy can be recycled and stored. So it creates energy. And this is why you want to consume structured water and have structured water in your body, because it creates a sense of, or it creates an energy for your body, which is so cool because now, we used to think of nutrition as just what you ate, but now we know nutrition is how you're breathing, the light entering your body, the water entering in your body. All of these things are nutrients. So while the idea of water having a memory is still being debated, many experiments, including those by Masaru Emoto, Dr. Emoto, suggest that water can respond to emotional input, music, and words. His work is not considered traditionally scientific, but it's inspired many to question how deeply emotion and energy interact with our physical systems. So Emoto's work, if you look it up, there's tons of pictures online, but he essentially programmed water with different music or words and then took photos. I've never done a deep dive into why it's not considered traditional science, but it's very fascinating to look at how the water was structured differently when you say, I love you versus I hate you. And it's exactly what you would expect, whereas the water looked really beautiful when you said, I love you, and not beautiful at all when you said, I hate you. So this fluid matrix combined with fascia can essentially hold onto emotional charges. So when we do breath work and move this internal fluid system, we are shaking loose stagnant emotional patterns and allowing them to be released and reset and reprogrammed. You can reprogram the water in your body to be more structured, more beautiful, and more coherent so that you can hold more energy. I believe this is what it means to be high vibration, is someone who actually lets emotions flow through them rather than someone who is only ever thinking about good emotions or someone who stores emotions that they should be feeling and letting go. So cellular memory and epigenetics. Let's go even deeper. If you guys want to go really deep on this, I have another solo episode on generational trauma, which is fascinating. We look at all the studies there. But down to the cellular and genetic level, every cell in your body stores not just biological functions, but also emotional imprints. That's so cool. So this is what people refer to as cellular memory. And while it's not being explored in the scientific world, there's a growing body of research to suggest it's real. Sorry. And while it's still being explored in the scientific world, there is a growing body of research to suggest that it's real. So like I said, all of this stuff is very new. There's probably a lot of scientists out there that would say it is not real, but there's a lot of scientists who would say it is real. So it's definitely not agreed upon by everyone. Maybe it never will be, but the studies are fascinating. So that's just to say that. Epigenetics is a study of how gene expression is regulated without altering DNA sequence itself, has shown that trauma can be inherited. That means that maybe your trauma is not your own. I like to say that's why sometimes you don't have to make sense of the emotions that are coming up, because they could be your great, 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 great grandfather's emotions. I know, you just think about the last 3 generations. How many of them went to war? How many of them experienced sexual abuse? It is a lot to think about the trauma that you could have inherited, which leads us to our example study that was done on the children of Holocaust survivors. and they had altered cortisol profiles, so the hormone that's associated with stress. And that suggested that there was a transgenerational biological impact. I know the studies have also been done on Holocaust survivors' offspring to show that there is a more likelihood of them having certain diseases. So these are called epigenetic marks, and they can be reversed through healing practices, including somatic work, mindfulness, and of course, breath work. When we use the breath to calm the nervous system and bring safety back into the body, we're helping turn off those stress genes and create new patterns for yourself and also anyone who might come after you in your lineage. So you are changing the generational trauma so that you're not bringing it down to other people. Releasing emotions safely. Okay, so trauma gets stored with an emotion. It's not completed. So you have to go through the process of feeling it to heal it. There's no other way. There's no back door. Can't sneak around it, you know? So maybe you need to scream, cry, run, shake, but couldn't. Maybe that happened when the trauma happened, so the energy got stuck. Your body holds on to that unprocessed energy as a protective loop. The only way to release it is to give your body permission to feel it now in a safe and resourced way. That doesn't mean reliving your trauma, okay? It means allowing the sensations to move through. I'm pausing for a long time here because I want to think of the best way to say this, but fully grieving something that happened or fully going into the sadness is not reliving your trauma. That's just feeling an emotion. Okay, so this is where somatic release comes in. Crying. Releases oxytocin and restores emotional balance. Depends on the type of crying that you're doing, but it can also release endorphins so that you're feeling less pain. It can release cortisol. Yawning can reset the vagus nerve. Shaking can discharge survival energy, just like animals do in the wild. Laughing can stimulate endorphins and re-regulates energy. Breathing shifts the nervous system and brings it to presence. Getting into your body, doing something with your body is so healing, even if it's just putting on 3 songs in the kitchen every morning and dancing non-negotiable. If you do that for a week, you will find yourself having a very, very, very good week. So why is breathwork so effective? So breathwork is unique in the only function. It's the only thing that you can do to completely control the autonomic nervous system consciously. It is the only thing. That's why I love breathwork so much. It works on everybody because it's automatic built-in reflex. When I say reflex, I mean something in the body where thing A happens and then B will most certainly happen. It's the same with breathwork. There isn't a person out there that isn't wired to have the same physiological changes as everyone else when they breathe. And an example of this is when you go to the doctor and they do the knee jerk reaction in your knee where they use the little hammer and kind of tap your tendon and see, you will never be able to stop your leg from kicking out when that happens because the message doesn't go all the way up to your brain. It goes to the spinal level and back again. And that's the same with certain ways of breathing. There's no way that you can, if I breathe like this, I can't think myself out of the reactions that my heart is going to have. My heart is automatically, no matter what, going to react to that the same way as everybody else is. It's a reflex in our body that we cannot consciously think our way out of with our thoughts. So breathwork is such an amazing tool for people who maybe have tried meditation and mindfulness and find themselves really struggling to think differently. If you struggle to get a hold of your brain and the way that your brain is thinking, and you just find meditation and mindfulness so hard, breathwork is such a good entryway into that because all you have to do is control your breath, which is totally doable. You can control your breath. I always use the example of someone having a panic attack. You don't go to them and just say, like, think different thoughts. No, you're going to go to them and say, take some deep breaths because it's so much easier. So when you change your breath, you change your state, period. Here's what happens in the body during breath work. Increased oxygenation to the tissues, CO2 fluctuations, Vagal tone improves, that's calming the heart and digestive system. Emotional memory is accessed via the limbic system stimulation, and some people can access altered states, which can allow for subconscious reprocessing. This means that breathwork is a really great way to reprogram your subconscious mind. Studies on conscious connected breathwork, like some of our breathwork or holotropic breathwork or transformational breathwork, shows increased parasympathetic activity, emotional catharsis, and improved mental health outcomes, which is amazing. So breathwork takes you beyond the thinking brain and into the felt experience, the place where real healing happens. If this conversation is resonating with you, I want to gently invite you into the portal, our breathwork subscription. Our monthly breathwork membership is where we guide you through emotional releases, energetic clearing, and nervous system healing, all in the comfort of your own home. You have wonderful breathwork recordings to do. Plus, you also get journal integrations, and we have hundreds of testimonials of people saying that it has completely changed their life. So I want to invite you to join us in the portal and do some breathwork. I will put a free trial in the show notes of this episode. Or if you're listening and you are feeling called to help others heal using their breath, we have the Being Method certification. We've certified over 300 people now in a comprehensive training that combines science, spirit, and somatic wisdom. You'll not only learn all the techniques, but the physiology, the science, and the energy behind them. Both are beautiful steps on your next healing path. And if you're holding pain, I want you to know this. You are not broken. Your body is doing the best it can to protect you. And with breath, intention, and love, you can let go. Thanks for being here and listening. Thanks for being in your body. And thanks for breathing. Until next time, stay soft, stay open, and stay curious. Thank you for listening. This is MJ Renshaw of the Being Method podcast. And I love you. I love you so much. Thank you for listening.